bit more. Jacob introduced me fine, so I may not even go through all of this, but my name is Tori Collier, and I reside in Norman, Oklahoma. And I'm a wife and mom of three. I have about 20 years experience. I consider myself to be a disabilities advocate. I have about 18 years of experience advocating for my son in special education, who started when he was about 3 years old in special services and public education. And so those years flew by. As Jacob mentioned, being a community consultant, working in state government, all the other, I think the only thing that he didn't mention was that before I got into all of this, I was a fitness instructor. So I got to be a Zumba instructor. So that was fun. And it really helped with my just self-care of, after caring for my son and all the things. And so, but I just want to let you, this is a picture of my family on Easter. My youngest, Cannon, my oldest next to him is Bryce, and my tall middle daughter is Bailey, and my husband, Milton. So I want to tell you a little bit about what we'll be talking about today. We'll talk about the presentation, objectives. I'll tell you a little bit of statistics that families experience nationwide when they're caring for someone with disabilities. I'll talk about a little bit my family's journey with diagnosis and all the challenges of that. I'll talk about as we grew up and milestones that we were able to accomplish. And then I'll talk about, what it's like, my advice or recommendations for supporting families, empathy in action, I call it, providing family-centered care during challenging times. And hopefully we'll get to do a case study together and be able to engage more together, which I'm looking forward to that. And then at the end, we'll talk about just some takeaways from our talk today. So our objectives that were promoted with this talk is that we hope that you will learn about one family's perspective of raising a child with disabilities from diagnosis to adulthood and some of its challenges. I hope you'll be able to explore ways to support families of children or adults with disabilities as service providers, and be able to explore strategies for maintaining family-centered, empathetic service and care through challenging times. So that's what we hope you'll get out of this talk today. So here's a little bit about those family statistics that we talked about, or that I mentioned. So families of children caring for a child with disabilities face unique challenges, and some of them are divorce rates. It's very challenging caring for a child with disabilities, and that also oftentimes puts extensive strain on a marriage. In psychology today, it shows that divorce rate can be as high as 87%, especially for those caring with a child with autism. Another thing that's impacted is our emotional mental health well-being. There was a study done by Science Direct that looked at parents caring for children with autism spectrum disorder and found that 61% of those parents experienced mild to severe stress. 53% had anxiety. 54 reported experiencing depression. 74% of mothers and 48% of fathers met the diagnostic criteria for depression. And then some of the mothers had clinical anxiety that was able to be diagnosed. So lots of stress when caring for children and adults with disabilities. Depression was another thing that I wanted to highlight. The National Family Caregivers Association found that among caregivers that included those caring for those with disabilities had 61% of reporting more depression than those that weren't caring for children with disabilities, and 51% reported more sleepless nights in their care, as well as other physical ailments that they position with caring for those with disabilities. So it really shows that we really need some, empathetic care and service and support for these families because they are going through a lot trying to balance care for their loved one as well as their own life of just being a person working, living, and playing like everyone else and just trying to maintain that balance. So it really shows that we really need to focus on how we can better support them. So I want to do a roll call. I know a lot of you have already put in the chat where you are from, and it looks like from here, from what I can see, is most people are service providers or supervisors of service providers. Is there anyone else that maybe are outside of service provision? Sometimes you can be you can be both. Just want to make sure if I have families on to acknowledge those that are caring for those with disabilities as well as being a provider. All right. Well, I'll keep going. Feel free to throw something in the chat if you wanted to add to that. This is a picture of my son's rendition of a show, and I want to see if y'all could put in the chat on what you think the show that he was trying to replicate with his Legos. Any takers? Chopped. Oh, very good. Okay, another parent. Hey, hey. I hope to be able to talk to it so that you'll get something out of this as well. Okay, we got one. Yes, very good. Okay, Mary hit it. Jeopardy. That is something that he just kind of fixated on and was trying to replicate Jeopardy in Legos. I could not. Oh, welcome, welcome, Rebecca. Um, I I would try to get him to follow the instructions on the Legos. Never worked out. He wanted to make what he wanted to make, but I thought I'd throw that in the slide. Thank y'all for playing along with me on that. He'd be pleased that y'all got it. All right, so I'll talk about my beginnings with my family. This is my husband and I days after bringing my son home thank you, Lori. Days after bringing my son home from the hospital. And in the beginning, I mean, just like any parent, we had feelings of hope and excitement and anticipation, imagining all your child, will become in baby form, right? My husband had dreams of playing sports with his son, just building a legacy, with someone that could kind of take his place on the earth, as he gets older, and sharing all the things that he enjoys. And then me, I was just full of hope. Like everything in my body was like, how can I support this child, through like nursing and caring for, I mean, everything that my aspirations kind of shifted, to this child of caring for him. And so it was a big shift. And then as far as a marriage, it was even a shift, going from being able to just go out to the movies, impromptu, do whatever you want, to now everything kind of revolving around this crying child. And speaking of crying child, that was one of the things that we kind of noticed. I kind of come from a big family, so there was always like a lot of little cousins and things like that around. So I expected crying. But my little son, Bryce, he cried a whole lot. Unless he was nursing and with me, he was crying. And so I was just told, oh, he's just colicky, no worries. As he grew, he was a lot more fidgety, getting into things. But they're like, oh, that's just a toddler, they're into things. And so as we moved from, being that baby stage, and getting more into that toddler stage, that's where we kind of started noticing some differences that was concerning to me. So as you can see, this is a picture of Bryce when he's probably about 3 or 4. And we're over my grandmother-in-law's house and just typical things. She just was playing TV and he was just really distressed by what was coming through the TV and the sound. And he's covering his ears. And so those kind of behaviors are things that we would notice. It would seem like we couldn't, like he couldn't hear us maybe. And so I thought, maybe he's got some hearing issues and I need to take him to get hearing screenings. Started with my pediatrician and he was like, he can knows his letters, numbers, and colors. Seems like he's going through all his benchmarks fine. We did a hearing test, just one they do in the office. He didn't see any any problems there. But he said, but if you're really concerned, you could go have an auditory screening. And so that's what we did. We went and had auditory to a professional. That's what she did as her profession, and it came back that he could hear fine. And so that's when we started just kind of delving into more of, even though our pediatrician was saying it's fine, our mom just knows that there's something else possibly going on, just because I was just around a lot of kids, and he was bright and he did have words, and he was very expressive and very focused. But those things about, like, when you call his name and not being able to sit and be still and attend, even just a little bit, um, worried me. So it caused me to investigate a lot more. So when he was about 3, between the ages of 3 and 4, we had him evaluated by an early intervention program here in Oklahoma called Sooner Start. And they thought that he may have some maybe developmental disabilities that they could support. And so they started sending someone to the house to just work with him with Play-Doh and things like that. They just assured me it'd be something that he'd grow out of and not to worry. I kept pushing, though, for evaluations, and learned that public schools give evaluations as well for preschool children. And once I pushed there, the psychologist told me, said, well, I'm not supposed to tell you, because technically, we don't give official diagnosis till they're about 7, but I suspect that he's probably on the autism spectrum. And then he said, I'm so sorry. And I was just like, oh my God, I just, his distress or his concern kind of sounded kind of like a death. And I really didn't know what all that meant at the time, but we soon learned. And some of the initial reactions of, once I started looking up autism and what that meant, and that it could be something lifelong that they would need to have supports around. I know my husband took it. I went into mama bear mode, where what can we do to fix it? How are we going to fix it? How are we going to heal it? How are we going to solve it? You know what I mean? But my husband took it really hard. It really was like a death of a dream, a death of a son. He was very depressed. That put a lot of emotional strain, because I was like, come on, fight with me. But he was just like, it was just disappointing having a child that couldn't attend, that he couldn't talk to, that was seemed very distracted. It just really upset my husband a lot, and it just made it really hard on the marriage. Also, in our circles, social circles, I was a part of a mom's group as a preschooler, and all the moms would come out. We do dinner and play dates over the house. And the more different that Bryce grew and became, the lesser were invited over to houses, the less birthday parties we were invited to. So that was one of the shrinking circles that I say happens to families, that as they walk through diagnosis and the children start differentiating in behaviors and what happens to a family. Our roles and responsibilities kind of shifted in the home. We went from just regular stuff of, caring for a toddler, to now these timed schedules, strict diets, medicines, round the clock supplements, transportations to and from therapies. It was just, it does separate you from your typically developing parents, because they're not doing those things. They're going to the park fine. They're going to birthdays, parties fine. And it's very isolating and lonely, going through the early diagnosis, at least for our family. So I'll keep going. As we started navigating more, we started going into the world of medical, educational, and social systems that we had to impact, or that we were impacted by or interacted with. So with medical, I enlisted my son in medical trials. He seemed very hyperactive, and so there was medical trials for ADHD and autism, and so I did listen to those. There was a doctor that was like a guru for autism. They called like biomedical interventions, that was known to almost cure children with autism. And so we would drive, 2.5 hours, and to see him and to be tested, stool samples and blood work, and all that rigor. And I was doing intensive research on the internet, trying to figure out what I could do. What could I do to help my son? Um, Educational supports, I kind of mentioned, that reached out to the public schools. to help, because they had those early interventions with preschools, where he could go half a day and go to preschool for children they suspected had developmental disabilities. That was helpful, but as a mom, I wanted my kid to go to regular daycare. That was not my dream. And so I kind of pushed and went to private daycares that I would have gone to if I didn't have that diagnosis. And I was so shocked when they would say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, we can't handle that. We don't." And I'm like, "He's little. He's 2. He's 3. And so I was just very, I think, surprised by the lack of care, and how closed and narrow those service provisions were for my family, especially with him being my first child. I was just really surprised. Um, this is a picture of one of his first private occupational therapists. Bryce was very, um, anything goopy, green, sloppy like oatmeal would almost cause him to gag. And so working with occupational therapists on getting him used to textures and playing in them and touching them was really helpful. You'll notice he has these big headphones on. He was doing music therapy and hoping that different decibels of sounds would kind of help reprogram his brain so that he was more they called it sensory disorders, where he's heightened sensitivity to everything, lights and noises. And so they were trying to kind of recalibrate how he processes that sensory integration. So that's what that picture is. I want to show y'all some videos, and I see our time is moving fast, so I may have to move, but I want to at least show you a video. I wanted you to see what it's like, or what it was like for when he was in school in kindergarten. We're trying to do inclusivity in kindergarten. And so I'm going to try to do that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I'm going to try to share video. So one moment, hang in. I'm going to share. Okay. And Jacob, if you or someone can give me a verbal that you can see the video and that you can hear it.
Yes.
You
Yep,
can't.
it
Awesome.
is. Yep, we can hear and see it.
Awesome. All right, here we go.
So let's count it. 5, 10. Yes. So we knew that our pennies, we had like a mirror. The water is so clear, it's so white, like a mirror, and shiny that it reflects. The sun shines down on it and it reflects.
Money?
Yeah, if it's cloudy, if it's dark outside, that means it reflects black. It's so clear. It says, why is seawater salty? We're not going to answer. Get an answer in your head, think about it, and then see if your answer matches up. I'm not going to ask you, but
It's time to go.
you can go play at 1:31.
Not yet.
Let's try it. Let's try it. But it's not. It's just 4, 5, 6. Okay? So let's count
All
it.
right. That was Bryce there. I'm going to stop share. And then I want to show you, if I can, another video where he is in a program called ABA, Applied Behavioral Analysis, that's more one-on-one. And so I want to show you that difference. See if you can see here. All right, one more verbal cue that you can see.
Yep, you are good to go.
Thank you.
She's brushing. She is brushing. Good job. Jumping. Good work. Smelling flowers. Nice sentence. What's he doing? Huh? Sleeping. Yes, he is. Watering. Yes, watering the flower. Good work. Where do you live? Norman. And where do you go to school? Good job. What's your birthday? September. Very nice. September 14th. Ah! That was awesome! Good job. You're so smart. Give me your pennies. You get a big one this time because you did so great. 1, 2, 5. Good job, Bryce Collier. You are the man.
All right. Now I'm going to go back to, and if y'all have any comments or anything, definitely pipe in, but I'll go back to the slideshow. Okay. Show me. Okay, there we go. Now I can see y'all. All right. So that video, those difference in the videos, unfortunately, that ABA therapy that seemed to really work for Bryce really well was only allowed while he was in kindergarten. They wouldn't let him progress and have some semblance of that therapy throughout his elementary school years, which we believe really would have helped him. ABA therapy back then was so expensive, where there were parents that were mortgaging their houses to be able to have that in-home supports. With those therapists, there's been a lot of policies that have passed that is allowed insurance now to pay for those things. But back then, 18, 15 years ago, it just wasn't available then. And so Bryce's progression in his speech and interactions and communications was really limited because of that. But I talked about I'll talk about social supports, the importance of families really finding groups to be able to have a sense of belonging in is very important. I know with me, I just threw myself into disability trainings and advocacy so that I could learn how to better advocate for my child and other children like him. Parenting circles that I could be involved in, I would try to join to try to offset those shrinking circles with my typically developing parents. And just when you're encouraging your family, just encourage them to find their people, because it really does empower you to care for your child and to have just a sense of belonging and normalcy in your life. Navigating social service resources, we were introduced to things like DDS, or Developmental Disability Service, and SSI. You should get income for your child that has disabilities through the federal government, and applying to those things, learning about what IEPs are, and those early intervention programs, and then trying to find places that daycare centers that would take children with disabilities. So families are navigating all of that. Can be really tough. This is his little sister, Bailey, with him. And so I just want to talk a little bit about families' resilience. Of again, finding your people. It's so important to find either family members and friends that can be accepting of what you're going through as a family member. And so I share that when you work with families, and then our family members who are on the call as well. And then connecting with circles that will just support your resilience, and really focusing on your strengths. That's one thing that I just encourage as providers that you keep in mind when you're dealing with your families, because they'll be just drenched in everything that your child can't do, everything you won't be able to do because you have your child. And you just become so focused on that. I mean, everything's revolving, therapies, everything, your whole life is revolving on that. And what I learned is that you got to focus on what your kid can do. What are his strengths? What Lego things can he build? What cool things can your child do? What makes him so special and unique? And you really got to be able to hold on to that. Because if we're thinking about it, everyone has some type of disability. Me wearing glasses, people need supports. And so if you can encourage your parents to really think about that, less of the, oh my God, I'm so sorry for your loss, and more of focusing on the strengths, will just really help families. This is a picture of Bryce graduating from elementary school with the principal and one of the teachers. So I'll talk to you a little bit about growing up milestones. This is a picture of my family as our family grew. You can see there's baby Cannon and little sister and Bryce, and we're at church. And so the roles of shifting from little sister having to function almost like a big sister, having to speak for him, advocate for him at a very, very young age, The importance of communication is so important, telling every place we go, this is Bryce, he has some special needs. These are things that support him and that he needs. And it's important for families to be able to devise supports that will help them easily communicate what their child needs to wherever they go and whoever is watching over their loved one. So, and then the importance of self-care. I mentioned that I became a Zumba instructor, and that wasn't necessarily out of fun. It was something that I had to be pulled into to say, because I was like, I don't have time. I'm working, I'm caring for a child with special needs and these other children, and I have a husband and a house. And I was like, I can't do anything. But I learned that unless you can care for yourself, have some kind of outlet to be a human, that it will be really hard for you to maintain and not burn out and be able to offer anything to anyone. So I threw that in there, that self-care bullet. This is Bryce and Bailey on Halloween. And so I just want to put in there just making sure that we encourage families to cherish milestones, normalcy, your traditions, what you enjoy. Don't lose that just because you get a diagnosis. Bryce has got on like 3 different costumes. He's got a railroad hat on, he's got a pirate hat, and a cowboy outfit. And I was thrilled. I'm like, yes, if that will help you participate, let's go. You wear all of them. You know what I mean? And so just relax, become flexible so that you can enjoy your family, because everything in the world will be screaming at you that, that the disability, the disabled, the, oh, I'm so sorry. And so you find those moments to cherish and maintain balance and positivity in your life to help you cope with the challenges that you'll face as you're raising a child or caring for a child or young adult or adult with disabilities. This is Bryce. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
We have a question in the chat. It says, can you speak more about that and convincing families that are already overwhelmed?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, the overwhelm's going to happen because we're human. And I think it's just really meeting families where they are affirming that this is hard. This is hard, and what you're feeling is completely normal. You have to tell families that you're okay, that there's nothing about your feelings that are wrong. This is an overwhelming thing. You're doing more than a typically developing parent. You've got added stress. And so affirming where they are, but then telling them what they can do, because I know that helped me. It feels like everything's out of control and you're not in control of anything and you're just being dragged through life. But my advice would be, again, getting connected to support groups like your own, hearing other families, and then sometimes that can be overkill. I got involved in so many support groups that I was tired of hearing about, oh my God, my kid had an accident. Oh my God, this and that. Even that became, so you have to gauge what works for you. But finding that support is key. And then if you need to limit it, it's okay. If you need to increase it, it's okay. If you need to pull completely back for a moment to get your breath, that's okay. Just normalizing what they need and not letting anyone tell you what you need, what you should be doing, how you should be feeling. That would be my advice. And then like, yes, focusing on ability versus disability difference and what your kid can't do. That would be my advice. I hope that that answered that question.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. So I'll just say planning for adulthood is super hard. Losing the support of educational system. It's really with the governmental, that IEPs of making, or I know making's a bad word, but encouraging or regulating that everyone should be focused in the educational field, focus on an individualized education plan for your child is really helpful. It's not perfect, but it's helpful. You've got that speech therapy and occupational therapy and other supports while in school. And then they're cute and they're young. And a lot of people have more grace for that. As your children grow, you lose a lot of those supports that you have when you're in school going from adulthood. And unfortunately, the world isn't necessarily set up and geared to those with disabilities. It's set up and geared for those that can do things without support. And so it is a challenge. And so it takes intense planning as early as you can. So that middle school planning is paramount. Finding connections even when they're in elementary school. Who likes working with your child? Working your child when they visit the grocery store. What are they interested in? Finding those interests early and trying to hone the family all along the journey so that by the time they get to this graduation stage, you've got some ideas of what your kid could do, even if it's in the play realm and recreational area. How can they contribute to society? But you got to start working on that really early. And with me, Bryce has pretty significant disabilities where he's not able to attend and focus on his own. And so we found a day center where he can, do things that are fun, participate. He can participate in recycling because he loves that. He'll pick up anything he sees just to put it in the recycle bin. So really, we're really trying to hone those skills. And I believe that one day I'll be able to find someone that wouldn't mind taking him on to mentor him for recycling or mail carrying as the world continues to open up and embrace different various abilities. I'm praying that there'll be more opportunities for my son. So, but navigating those systems is challenging, and the earlier you can plan, the better. This is a picture of Bryce in the music room of autism. He loves music. So I'll talk to you a little bit about empathy in action and supporting families through challenging times. So actively listening to parents. I mean, it's paramount to be able to partner together. Like I said, listening to those stories of challenge while you encourage them about the positive things to focus on, but really listening to what they're telling you will help you devise a plan to help them. You can't one size fit all parents, and that's why that active listening is really important, as well as tailoring and being respectful and supportive of the family's culture and how they do things, considering those things, being culturally responsive too about kind of how they interact in their family and knowing that there's going to be differences there and that's going to impact how you tailor your care and support of them. So, but you'll learn that as you listen to them and as you listen to them share about how they care for their family and how they do life, and just making sure that it's tailored to them. I added this bullet because I think it's so important, workplace grace. I know there's service providers on here, but there are also family members who are working in the place, in workplaces, and grace is needed. There are the moms and dads who are caring for children, young adults with special needs are gifted and they contribute to the world. But what I'm hearing from a lot of parents is they're not even able to do that because the workplace is so restrictive, non-flexible, not understanding that I have to take a kid that has special needs to this special program that may not start until 9. What can I do to still meet my work hours but be able to care for my child so I can focus on work, not being so rigid and restrictive. I wanted to put that in there because that empathy and support, I think, goes beyond just service provisions, but we all need to be involved in making sure that families can participate in life, work, play, and live. And so we all have to kind of participate, not kind of, we all have to participate in that. Goal setting. When you're working with families, again, that honest communication is going to require trust, and trust is attained as the family knows that you're listening to them. They're listening to you. What you tell them works. There's not a closed door like you tell them to go over here and there's a barrier because maybe due diligence wasn't done. That can break trust because families are already juggling with a whole lot. And so when wrong information is given, it just complicates and challenges the family. But that honest communication is going to help, knowing that we're human and no one's perfect, but just being responsive. And even if something goes wrong, so sorry that happened. Here's something else that I researched for you that should work, that I checked myself. Doing warm handoffs in care and service and support is really helpful. And then collaborating on goal setting, not setting something for the family, but allowing the family to collaborate and tell you what their hopes and dreams are for their child, letting the child that can advocate for himself advocate for him or herself, and let those goals be integrated and be family-centered and person-centered and strengths-based. Some important Things to consider when working with families is that timely support. A lot of times, things are needed, in a hurry. And so when there's delays in the system, it really it hurts the family. And so if there's creative ways to provide things in the interim, to take up that time, that red tape that it takes for systems to work is really helpful. It really helps engender trust with caregiving and the family, and keeping the family going and having less challenges. Understanding your role as a care provider. Oh my gosh, this is so important. Providers are a lifeline to families. I mean, really hear that. You're a lifeline to families. Like, we really need your guidance. We need you to make things easier because it's hard. And so the things that you offer to us are jewels. And so I think a lot of service providers underestimate themselves of what they have to offer to families, what they have to give, how important your work is. And so I just wanted to put a bullet in there to let you know that what you do is so, so important on helping families be resilient. You help to foster a sense of community by the services and supports that you're able to provide as providers, helping families have a sense of belonging. When you're able to give us services and supports that we need, we're able to focus on critical things needed for a sense of belonging and providing resources for our families and our loved ones. So I just wanted you to know that too, that I want to cheerlead you on the work that you do, but that provides care for us in crisis, in setbacks, what you're able to provide. We get to the case study. So I'm going to read this to you just because I'm going to put it on the screen too so you can read along with me. But I hope that we can do an interactive case study together. These are pictures of Bryce from when he was in elementary school all the way to graduation. And so in elementary school, this student was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, intellectual disabilities, and autism. Student received ABA, or applied behavioral analysis, in kindergarten, with improved speech and behavior, but was denied continuation of services due to lack of resources. Teachers discontinued inclusive practices because it became disruptive to their classroom. So he was then confined mostly to an autism classroom with modified, as far as service provision, modified PE and 30 minutes of one-to-one speech and OT. In middle school, the student was contained to an autism classroom the majority of the day, with the exception of art. The only reason why he got to be in art is because an art teacher really loved his artwork and wanted him involved in the class and would modify instructions for him and didn't mind that he stood up and didn't sit down and didn't mind that he bounced when he colored. That's the only reason why he got to be in art class. The teacher filled out transition service report paperwork along with IEPs, but there was no practical job skills taught or preparation planning for the student. He participated in extended school year, which is a summer program called ESY, and he got to work with a public school transition service coordinator for evaluation who had high hopes for Bryce and working with him, but she retired the same year. So all of that experience went along with her. At this time, he was getting modified PE and now 25 minutes of one-on-one speech and OT. When he got to high school, there's a new transition service coordinator who refused to work with Bryce and other children who had severe to moderate disabilities, blaming the middle school for lack of preparation. The autism teacher used a DRS fund to create a supportive work program for those moderate to severe functioning students, but she wasn't able to keep the contracts up without that support. And so that was lost and not consistent. The mother attempted to reach out to DRS herself to do some planning, but they said because he couldn't attend and do stuff on his own for work skills, that they only recommended a sheltered workshop, which means that you're just kind of putting in a line that you assemble something, they dump it out, they break it all apart, and then you assemble it again. And those young adults do that all day long. The mother refused that because they believed that the student could do real work if trained and if taught. So the mother recommended some job coaching, which was refused, and therefore the mother and the child was dismissed from the program for refusal of what was offered. and then citing that the student couldn't work on his own independently. At this time, modified PE was being offered in high school, and now not one-on-one, but just classroom OT and speech, means offered to the whole classroom and no one-on-one. Post-high school graduation, no supportive transition services were in place and no job skill mastery was attained. The student's only remaining option was an adult day center with some in-home care services and supports. Now, you, in this case study, are the new director of special education service, and you learn about this case. There's a student who graduated and this is what happened. What interventions would you have put in place at each phase of this student's education to ensure successful transition service planning, job skill readiness, DRS, which is Department of Rehabilitation Services coordination, and community engagement for work and play opportunities post-graduation? So I want you to think about that. Hopefully you were thinking as I was reading about what ideas would you have done if you had a magic wand and just power to make change? Would you have implemented maybe in elementary school? What could have been done differently to help the student be able to ascertain transition services and be more successful? Any ideas? You don't have to start with elementary school, but if you want to come off mic and just tell me some ideas that you're thinking about, I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts, or everyone that wants to participate, and on the chat as well. All right, let the transition service coordinator go that was in high school. Yeah. Any other feedback, input? Continued ABA through elementary school definitely would have been helpful. Yes. Including family members in the IEP meetings. Yes. Listening to family members guiding those plans and goals. Yes. Was he in mainstream classes and then transitioned to separate? Yes, yes, just like that video, we started off in mainstream classes of inclusion, and then due to not being able to be more in having those more typically developing of being able to sit, attend, and sit quietly, then it just went more to contained classrooms. More inclusion classroom time in middle school, yes. Could ABA services be shared to 2 students, not only 1? Yes. That's thinking outside the box, because they definitely do it for speech and OT. If you can do classroom speech and OT, you can do classroom ABA services. Yes, that's creative thinking. Yes. So often I think admins get in a place of no and are unable to think creatively. Yes. Ability to do specials, music, PE, and art with peers. Yes. Much more of that, yes, would be beneficial. Opportunity for mother to provide an overview yearly of what works well for Bryce and identify class schedules with recommended modifications. Yes. Yes. And I would add just being that active listening and responsive implementation of those goals, and when no, instead of no, what can we do? If we can't do maybe what the parent wants or what the student needs, what can we do? Not just a no. Yes. Insurance will not pay for ABA provided in a school setting due to ABA being considered medically, no, will not pay, yes, due to ABA considered medically necessary. In Kansas, this is a huge issue. Yes. Yes. Training staff members on best practices. Yes. Yes. Whatever the in-services that special education teachers, I'm not quite sure that even that gets down to the whole staff, those supportive staff. So yes, and the provision to best practices with special ed teachers as in addition to regular ed teachers for those seeking and to inclusive teaching with all students is also, I think, beneficial to all educators to have some best practice coursework, yes. High school partner with local businesses, yes. They could teach specific job skills like a local restaurant, yes. Partnerships, yes. Thinking outside of the box, yes. And that way it's not just no, but it's and or would you consider this? And it's a transition services checkbox that you can note in the IEP that's being worked on, and it provides that student the skills they will desperately need before they graduate and after they graduate. Yes, these are all phenomenal. These are all phenomenal. Anything else? These are great. All right, I'll pause again. If I see something else in the chat, we provide funding and partnership with community employment and training. That is fantastic, Audra. That's fantastic. Vocational rehab services were not available to him in high school or after graduation. No, only because the offering was that sheltered workshop. So that was what was being offered through Voc Rehab or DRS. That's called here. They on the books. There's supposed to be this job coaching that's supposed to be available to students in high school and after graduation. There's supposed to be that planning, but oftentimes a lot of that isn't done in actuality. A lot of things are written and in policy, but it takes that empathy and folks to participate and make sure that those things actualize and actually happen. And there has to be oversight to ensure that those things are happening. And without that, things can be cited like we don't have enough support, we don't have enough resources. Those can be the reasonable excuses or reasons that a family can get when those things aren't done. Yes, mild criticism. Yes, yes, yes. But I think with calls like this, things can get better with just the awareness, hearing from families, partnering with families. What would happen if you had a family member with lived experience, a part of DRS? That changes the game. Then you've got that oversight there to really help navigate and talk about the importance to those administrators of actually making this thing where it's beneficial to families. Having families participating in the educational process in administration is also another thing that can help keep these things that should be done and empathy in real action, you know. Um, but these were great. Thank y'all so much for your participation with that case study. It makes me really hopeful to hear your ideas and know that you're already engaged and thinking outside of the box, which is awesome for youth and young adults right now. In conclusion, I wanted to tell you just that from a person with lived experience that, know that this is a very emotional journey for families as you're working with families. And so if you can just know that that's just what it is and to be able to navigate those emotions that these families are experiencing when they get the diagnosis and trying to figure it all out. Embracing empathy and collaboration, working with families is so important. And again, knowing the superpower that you have of your connection and your training with community-based resources that you're able to provide families is so important and a lifeline. So just remember how important you are. And then resilience and support. Families are resilient, but we really need your support. Your support empowers us as families to advocate for ourselves, and you recognizing and being empathetic supports families as we navigate our journey of disabilities and diagnoses.